Now turning to item 13, questions on notice, I'd like to thank all of our members who have submitted their questions. We have received an overwhelming number of questions regarding the proposed changes to the School of Social Sciences. These questions will be addressed en masse by the Vice-Chancellor in due course. So turning to question 1, where there are two folk, Dr. Jenny Fairthorne. I cannot attend because I do not currently support virtual meetings. Please will you explain why you have decided to hold virtual meetings when there is currently no COVID in the WA community? This decision is not in the interests of members, many of whom are older people and more likely to live alone. Such people rely on personal interactions with like-minded people to support their mental health. And from Mrs. Ruth Arnell, are there any plans to incorporate attendance in person as well as by Zoom? The other benefit to this is the meeting and greeting of old friends and acquaintances. Hugs and even handshakes are a tad difficult by Zoom. If we have to limit numbers, perhaps a variation on the roster system whereby those who missed out on one meeting could be given preference for the next. I do miss our meetings, so I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Well, thank you, Jenny and Ruth, for your questions. I have received similar questions of this nature from various other fellow graduates. As I have mentioned just now in my Warden's report, I wish to assure everyone that as soon as health authorities say it is COVID safe to hold a hybrid ordinary meeting, locals meeting in person at UWA and Zoom including those interstate and overseas, we will be doing so. The percentage of the population who have received their 2 doses of vaccine will be a significant factor guiding their decision. I'll now turn to question number 2 from Mr. Robin Salter. RSA Engineering saw firsthand the working remote issue in all its facets over COVID-19. What actions do the administrators believe are critical to keep up the mental well-being of the students and staff? RSA saw very clearly most of its staff really wanted to work from the office, and whilst working from home had some upside and was a novel experience, ultimately interacting and sharing was the winner. So I'll now ask the Vice-Chancellor if he would like to comment, and perhaps Emma may also wish to do so after.
Thank you, Warden. Thank you very much for your very good question. Even before COVID, we have been encouraging staff and their managers to adopt ways of working that are flexible and productive for many, many other reasons. Of course, COVID has accelerated that process over the past 18 months. On the one hand, it forced us to try to learn to work in new ways, but it also caused us to explore new things, how we can do things better. It is absolutely clear, and I agree with you, that at the end of the day, coming to work has an important aspect to how we as human beings work and interact with each other. Even as lucky as we are with relatively very few short shutdowns, that after the last week-long shutdown, I was so happy that I could come to work. So I echo your sentiment. However, we are going to continue to experiment with this blended mode of working because it's good for our employees and it's good for the university. So we are experimenting by allowing people to work, sometime from home, sometime from office. And so far, it's working wonderfully well. When it comes to students, it's more challenging. The beauty of a campus like ours, university like ours, is that it allows our students to learn together grow together socially, culturally, and all that, all the benefit that brings with it. So we would like all our students to be on our campus. And we are one of the very few lucky jurisdictions where we actually have face-to-face classes in most cases. Obviously, that opportunity is not available to our international students. Well, we can offer the content curriculum, but it is a challenge to offer our students who are taking courses online the social interaction. So, but it would be a mistake to assume that we cannot do anything. So there are some possibilities that technology offers, but they are no substitute to physical presence in our wonderful campus. I think it would be better for us to hear from our guild president, directly, looking at it from student perspective. Emma, I don't know whether you want to share your perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chancellor. I agree that it's really difficult to look after mental health and wellbeing when students are disconnected from our campus. Luckily, in Western Australia, we have the privilege of having a lot of face-to-face interaction on our campus. Even then, we have to make a proactive effort to engage with students that are coming out of lockdown or a pandemic. And through that, it's just by making our events as accessible as possible. All of our events are free, and we've had a really great turnout from people that normally don't engage with guild events, especially at our night markets and free breakfasts, which we've just started this year. For students that are offshore or studying from home, out of state, we've tried to utilise different methods of social interaction, so engaging on platforms such as Instagram, Discord, WeChat, WhatsApp, instead of our usual Facebook channel, and trying to provide meaningful experience through that. I think a lot of the students really benefit from feeling a sense of connection to our campus, even though they are not necessarily on campus. One of the best examples that I can provide is guild volunteering, running online graphic design or website design for students who are overseas, who can have a meaningful impact without having to be physically present in terms of volunteering and being able to work with others on a project. At the end of the day, really providing online events and reaching out and being accessible is the most that I think we can do to provide offshore students a sense of connection to our campus and the guild.
Well, thank you very much, Emma. Well, I'll move on to question number 3, which is from Mr. Amit Dehaya. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. What are we doing to bring international students back? Are there any plans? If yes, when are we expecting international students in UWA? Vice Chancellor.
Well, thank you. It's great to have a question from my namesake. We, of course, are very keen in bringing our existing students who are overseas to our campus. And of course, we are equally eager to bring new students. And fortunately, in spite of border being shut down, students are applying and we are admitting them. So we are hopeful, our students are hopeful, that it is simply a matter of time before they'll be able to come to our campus. Unfortunately, we don't control those decisions. They're made by state and federal governments, taking into consideration of evolving COVID situation. What I can tell you is that we are working with our state government, having many conversations, and similar conversations are taking place elsewhere. We do know that there are a couple of publicly announced pilot plans, pilot projects, if you will, to try to bring in limited number of students, who presumably will have been vaccinated, and then will have to go through a quarantine process. South Australia is one of those jurisdictions. New South Wales is the other jurisdictions. So both plans are ready to be launched, except the COVID situation in New South Wales has kind of put that plan in the back burner. Those of you who follow the progress with vaccination, I follow them regularly for various reasons, and I was thrilled to see that New South Wales today has exceeded 80% for the first jab. So once New South Wales experiments with that pilot project, I'm pretty sure others will follow suit. Hot off the press, today we got some lucky break. It had not been publicly announced as yet, but I received an email confirmation that the Commonwealth government will now allow international students who are supported through Commonwealth-funded scholarships. They will become eligible to apply for exemptions for travel to Australia. So that's a symbolic but important breakthrough. So suddenly we now see that the government is responding. So I remain hopeful that we will be able to bring back our students. Unfortunately, because of the fluidity of the situation, it is almost impossible to make a prediction when that might happen.
Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. I'm now turning to question number 4, sent in from Mr. Gregory Jarosh. What has UWA done over the past 2 to 3 years to reduce its financial dependency on foreign students from Asia and the associated fees collected, as has been past practice, and in response increased its IP patenting and investor involvement in UWA innovation projects? Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you. I provided partial answer to that IP issue, indicating that overall, on a relative scale, we have done well, but the revenue we generate is not sufficient for us to make a difference in our fiscal situation, how we operate the university. Having said that, I'm going to repeat what I said. It is absolutely important that we take our knowledge, our intellectual property to the community for broader dissemination, and some of it through marketplaces, so that our society as a whole benefits from it. And where appropriate, it brings economic benefit to our state, to our country. First part of your question, what are you going to do about financial dependency? Unfortunately, Australia has a very small population. We may think we have a lot of people, but we don't in a relative sense. It's a huge landmass with very small population. When you look at WA, that is even more so. And as a result, when you have 5 universities in WA, 43 universities in Australia, and because of our funding model, we simply do not have enough domestic capacity to support 43 institutions nationally and 5 in WA. As a result, over the years, our universities have become financially dependent on international students' revenue. UWA is at the low end of it. About 21% of our student body would be international. This compares on the average of about 40 to 45% for other group of 8 universities. So we have not actually grown as much as others have. But nevertheless, the question on diversity of students is important in our mind. Our plan is not to reduce dependency on international students. Our plan actually is to grow the number of students we have at UWA, both domestic and international, and to bring diversity from different parts of this country, of this state, and local neighborhood globally. That is, of course, Indian Ocean rim countries. So we'll continue to do that, and At the same time, we'll continue to make sure that the licensing work that we do is put to good work. We'll share one more good piece of information. Just last year alone, 3 inventions from the medical side of our university actually have received FDA approval. I don't have comparative data for the rest of the country, but I would imagine that having 3, if you will, products receiving FDA approval in 1 year must be one of the top achievements. We have more opportunity to work on that, and we'll continue to do so. So the answer that I give you probably you'll not find totally satisfactory because of the demographic and financial realities associated with public universities.
Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. Returning to question number 5 from Adjunct Professor Dr. Brett Davies, I believe that it is imperative that we are focused on the university's structural deficit and support the return of the university to financial sustainability. Can you please comment on financial sustainability, student load growth, and improving the student experience?
Thank you very much, Brett, for this very pertinent question. Your question certainly aligns with my way of looking at the future of this university. Let me make it plain and simple. As painful as it is for me to say this, because I said it last year, here's the reality. Many in the community still believe that this is a very rich university. We are a rich university in terms of ideas, in terms of richness of the people, of our students, staff, and whatnot. But financially, we are not a rich university. Some time ago, we probably were a relatively well-off university, but we are not. So if you have any doubt about that in your mind, please set it aside. Second question put to me was, we have a lot of land assets. Yes, we do. But when you put it within the context of what is available, yes, we have a lot of land assets, but we are not going to sell our Crawley campus. So the sort of disposable assets that we have, we have done some back of the envelope best estimate. The most we can get if we dispose all of those is probably going to be $150 million. And we'll accrue that over a number of years. It's not $100 million overnight. So to put things in perspective, for the last several years, we have been living beyond our means. Each year we are spending $70 million more than what our revenue would have supported. To be a bit more precise, we are spending $50 million more on an ongoing basis relative to our income, and we are not investing $20 million in maintaining our digital and physical infrastructure. So physical infrastructure would be buildings, labs, and whatnot. We have laboratories at this great university that are really dated. We have information system at this university that are dated. So just to make my point, imagine if you have to work today with a laptop that was made 20 years ago. Very likely it did not work. Number of our systems that we have in place are that old. And if they break down, we can't even replace them. So that's the result of that underinvestment. And a very modest estimate of that underinvestment is about $20 million a year. So 50 plus 20, that gives us 70. So with that, it is absolutely important that we get that part under control. Because if we don't, then we cannot support what we have. We simply cannot sustain all the good things that we do. We have no shortage of ideas, we have no shortage of good projects, but we don't have the resources to support any one of them. So this is literally true. The good news is that we have turned around. We have turned around because we have accepted the challenge, that we have to deal with it, and we are dealing with it. It is painful, it's not easy. I very much regret the sufferings of all who are involved in it, but I also applaud the leadership that our many leaders have demonstrated in grappling with this problem. So we are almost halfway through. We are almost halfway through. And as a result of that, we can already see the benefit. So the benefit, partly because of the cost cutting, partly because we got some one-time revenue. In the past, we used one-time revenue to pay the bills. It would be like each one of us borrowing money from our credit card or getting some, lottery wins to pay the daily bills, whether it's rent, whether it's for food. So we stopped doing that. As a result, today, I'm very pleased to share with you, we are able to make one-time investment of about $80 million. We have $80 million one-time money that we can invest. And we are now looking at selecting projects where we want to invest them. And I can report to you that they will all be invested in improving students' learning experience. So we'll have more to share with you in the days to come. So that takes me to student load growth. I think I have given you a sense of what we are doing. We are growing our enrollment domestically. Our goal, my goal, is to return this great university to its glorious past. I would like any student graduating from any high school in this state to make UWA number one choice. Whether they come or not, that's another matter. They'll have other consideration. But I want them to think, I want them to dream that one day they'll come to UWA, as was the case when many of you made those decisions. Sadly, we have lost that edge, and we are determined to get it back. So that's student load growth. That would also mean for us to think outside of our comfort zone. We are very comfortable in the setting of West Perth. What we know from our enrollment data is that we are being challenged in the north of the city and the south of the city. That's where student population is growing, and we are struggling getting students from the south of the city to come to our campus. Many, many reasons. Our Guild president outlined some of the transport issues. So that's one factor, but there are other factors. So we are working with schools trying to understand what those challenges are, and we would like our university to be the university for all. And then finally, improving student experience. I indicated we are seriously looking at investing in a number of projects to improve student experience. I'll just give you one example of that. A lot more work to be done. But we don't do as good a job in providing career counseling to our students. As a result, there is a perception in the marketplace that if you come to UWA, you get a first-rate education, but you may or may not get jobs. That is absolutely not true. We know that from employment data, UWA graduates rank number one in WA, but the perception is there that we don't do enough. We do quite a bit, except we do it in fragmented manner. So we're going to make the Guild area, student central area, as the centerpiece of our student career services operation, and we'll be making significant investment there. There are two task forces I reported last time, I believe, are working, one particularly on student experience. So they will be reporting sometime between November and December, and we'll implement as many of their recommendations as we can. Second task force is looking at future of education, again with a view of responding to the changing needs of our traditional students and non-traditional students. So non-traditional students will include lifelong learners. Many of you are lifelong learners. Micro-credentials, recognizing prior learning. So a host of issues are being looked at, and that group will provide us with their interim report sometime end of the year. Because it's a futuristic activity, we have given them a bit more time. We hope to have their full report sometime next year. Thank you, Madam Warden.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. I turn now to question number 6 from Mr. Eosius Regan. For many people, Reed Library is not a place to study, but rather a place to socialise. This has meant that students looking for places to study have moved. The Barry J. Marshall Library has provided a space with a balance of easy access as well as quiet and respectful study atmosphere. However, closing Barry J. Marshall at 8 p.m. on weeknights and between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. on weekends is simply not enough. What are you doing to open Barry J. Marshall Library as a backup to the Reed Library? Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you for the question. Libraries are places where many different activities take place. So those of you who come and visit our campus, those of you who are from the city, if you are visiting our campus in early evenings, late evenings, one place that you'll see a lot of activity would be our library, particularly the Reed Library. So library, of course, you can have a look from outside, get an impression, but if you go inside, you'll find that there are a lot of different activities taking place. Of course, there's the social activity that goes on, but from my experience, actually, there's more serious study that takes place. I, from time to time, walk by, pass by, check it out. And in fact, I like what's happening at the Reed Library and other libraries. The Reed Library is the most visible one. One of the areas that we're going to invest in with that $80 million that I made reference to is really on the library side. This is not ongoing expense. This is just one-time expense. So as I indicated, we are resource challenged. We have a large campus, smaller number of students, so we have a mismatch. As a result, we have no choice but to make sure that we are using our resources in the most optimal way. So for the library, what it means is actually we monitor number of students who come in, when they come in. And based on the data, we have taken these steps that we have. The Reed Library, for example, offers study spaces beyond the ground floor. So there's a collaborative area, including over 400 individual study seats in a silent area on the top floor. And from data of student usage, we know that Reed Library is a lot more used than Barry Marshall. So the decision that was taken for Barry Marshall was based on volume of traffic. But we will take your feedback into consideration when you review opening hours for 2022. So thank you very much for your question.
Emma, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sorry, if you could just go back to the question. Yeah, so the Reed Library, I disagree with the idea that the entire library is a place to socialise. While the ground floor is loud comparatively to all the other floors, it is a collaborative zone, and I think that place provides a much needed home for students to work on collaborative assignments or work with students studying the same thing or work with their friends. The different floors of Reed house many different forms of studying, with the third floor being renowned for extremely quiet studying. You can hear a pin drop. You almost feel lonely up there, even though there are 400 seats. While the Guild and students mourn the loss of library hours, we understand that there are resourcing restrictions, and I have frequent meetings with the library who have been really transparent about those resourcing restrictions as well as access to the libraries during a certain time. So in the process of this, we do try and make sure that the negative impact on student experience is minimised through any changes. This year we have we've seen some welcome changes, such as making the law library 24/7, as well as making the Med Dent library 24/7. Hopefully in the future, that can be something that Barry J and also Reed can see. And so far we've had really positive feedback from students who are able to access the library during those hours.
Oh, thank you very much, Emma. I will now turn to question number 7, received from Miss Alexi Wallace. Could the university clarify what policy documents exist to protect students against discrimination and victimisation during a fit for study process? For example, the University of Sydney has a clear procedure, but UWA does not. Vice Chancellor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. It points to, I guess, a shortcoming we have in how we record and publicize our policy. So we do have a fitness to study procedure, not called policy, so that's the weakness. That procedure links 3 existing policies dealing with the important subject matters that you referred to. However, it's not filed under policy. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that procedure that links 3 policies into the relevant policy pod sometime next week. And furthermore, we are going to review the procedure and the policies and consider whether we need an overarching policy along the line that you have suggested. So leave it with us. Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. We will determine whether the current 3 policies are satisfactory or not, and we'll consider an overarching policy for the future.
Thank you very much. Well, I will turn on now to question number 8. Mr. Wee Lai. The proposed restructure of the School of Molecular Sciences threatens the viability of a number of research areas and collaborative networks in chemistry, such as computational chemistry. How will UWA mitigate this foreseen damage? Vice Chancellor.
So first, thank you very much for your question. Again, I return to the reality. The reality of our situation is we are stressed, we have resource challenges, and you have to reduce cost. So on what basis do you reduce cost? Of course, complex set of considerations go into our decision making, but one of the key drivers is how many students we have. Unfortunately, the way universities are set up, the way we have practiced some of our policies, there is almost no connection between students and activities. So even today, our practices allow for the university or elements of the university to offer new units, new courses, without taking into account of availability of resources. So we're going to change that, because you can't do things if you don't have resources. So the areas that are being curtailed are areas which simply do not have sufficient number of students. When you cut things, there are negative consequences. So the question is how best we can manage it. All the feedback that you've got and our prior knowledge, we'll take them seriously into account as we consider our response to the change proposal. And we want to understand what those projects are. At this point in time, it's very difficult for us to determine precisely what those are. And the reason for that is, before the process concludes, we will not know who is going to be with us, who is not going to be with us. So before that determination is made, we can't determine which projects will be impacted negatively. And once we arrive at that point, then we'll try to find alternate arrangements for those projects and see whether they can be continued in one fashion or the other. So I'm afraid that I don't want to go any more into specifics because I don't want to prejudge the outcome of the consultation process. On School of Molecular Sciences, formal consultation process is ended. The school leaders are now reviewing the feedback that they have received, and at some point in time, they'll come forward with their responses. It'll go through a number of different stages of vetting, and finally, it'll be up to me as Vice Chancellor to approve those changes or not. Once we reach that point, then we'll have some clarity and we'll be able to take appropriate actions. But I cannot promise that there'll be no negative consequences, because that's simply is not possible.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. I will now turn to question number 9 from Mrs. Diane Bauer. Do the media comment that UWA is discontinuing or discouraging research functions and is implementing full teaching loads reflect the actual situation or intent? Has research staffing been reduced? If the above are answered in the affirmative, I would be most concerned. UWA holds a proud international reputation on account of its excellent research output over many years. Vice Chancellor.
Thank you for that excellent question, and thank you the way you phrased it. Do the media comments reflect the reality? And the answer is they do not. And it's unfortunate that media and other individuals take information in a piecemeal fashion and then report it the way they see fit. There is absolutely no intention on our part to downgrade research activities at this university. And there are a lot of things that we are doing that are going to enhance our research capacity, our research impact. Just this morning, I had the great pleasure tying research activity with support from members of Convocation. This morning, I had the great pleasure of participating at a ceremony where Victor Chang Institute, that works based in Sydney on cardiovascular disease, is setting up a partnership with UWA, and we launched a jointly funded endowed chair with support from West Farmers. And the CEO of West Farmers is a proud graduate of this university. So you see the connection. So why are we doing it? Because we believe that we have expertise at this university that is doing wonderful work on cardiovascular diseases, but we don't have scale. We're just too small. So we need to work with others. So Victor Chang comes in, and with the support from West Farmers and others, we're just going to keep on expanding it. And our goal is to turn UWA into a major partner in this groundbreaking research on cardiovascular. So they just won. Day before, I was in Exmouth, participating in the opening of Mindiru Foundation's Exmouth Research Facility. And I was thrilled to see the large number of graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, academic staff who are working on various aspects of ocean, displaying their work proudly at an event there. So that's another example of it. So in terms of teaching, one of the cultural problems that we face in research-intensive universities, because of our reward system, not deliberately, but by virtue of our actions and practices, in some quarters, we started to neglect teaching. Earlier I mentioned that we are not able to attract students. I have absolutely no doubt that part of it is because we are not paying attention to teaching. It is my view, and I take a very strong view on it, you cannot call yourself a professor if you don't want to teach. Fortunately, most of us want to teach. So we have three categories of academic appointments. So part of it is based on our tradition, and it has been codified by virtue of our enterprise agreements. So the descriptions of those are not perfect, but they are what they are. We have to abide by the descriptions. But overall, when you look at the breakdown, I'm going to give it to you right now, they're reasonable. So we have a category that is called research intensive or research focused. We have about 450 academic staff in those categories. They're mostly externally funded, and they're mostly young scholars. So they spend most of their time on research. I would like some of them to be given the opportunity to participate in teaching. And I have absolutely no doubt that some of them will be outstanding teachers. If we don't train our future teachers, if we don't give them the opportunity, where are we going to get those teachers? So that's group number one. Group number two will be teaching and research mixed appointment, so-called TNR appointment. In many parts of the world that I'm familiar with, and I held one of those positions, the ratio would be, workload would be 40-40-20. 40% teaching, 40% scholarship, 20% other activities, so-called service. Serving on a committee, serving on external agencies, and those sort of things. Here at EWA, the ratio is 30% teaching, as reported by academic staff, not 40. In my mind, that's low, right? And 60% research, all right? So you can debate whether my view is the right view or not, but all I'm saying is relative to other similar institutions, our teaching and research staff report more of their time to be spending on research and less on teaching. Then you have the teaching focus category. So there comes the misunderstanding or misreporting. The way they have reported it, they gave the impression that teaching focus means teaching only. Not true at all. So we have another 250 or so in that category. My numbers may be a little bit off base. I'm going by my memory, so don't hold me for accuracy of those numbers, but just to give you a sense of how many we have. They report that they spend 30% of their time on research. So the criticism came when we decided to propose that some of our programs in languages and Asian studies will be turned into more teaching intensive or teaching focused positions. So the point here is teaching focus doesn't mean zero research. In fact, average reported level of activity already is 30%. And more importantly, we have the capacity to adjust how much time will be spent on teaching, how much time will be spent on research. Then you may say, why have you proposed that change? And the answer is very simple. We need people to do more teaching. And in an ideal world, if our staff could volunteer to do that, as I did twice in my teaching life in Canada in response to budget cuts, then there would be no need for the sort of changes that you're proposing. However, our enterprise agreement, governed by labor laws, agreed to by the university, requires that anytime you change staffing, you have to change work. So the practical implication of the proposed change is that those colleagues will just have to teach a bit more. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's the right thing to do. I go back to the fundamental issue I raised. Is teaching important or not? I can tell you, without students, there's no university. Without student revenue, there will be no jobs. So even if you left all of those things, if you go back to the raison d'etre of universities, it's all about teaching. It so happens that teaching and research, they complement each other. Research informs teaching, enhances teaching. So they go hand in hand. If we are going to focus solely on research or more on research, we cease to become a university of the kind that we are. We will become a graduate school. Caltech is a graduate school, but they're funded differently. We don't have the fiscal means to turn this place into a graduate school. We are a comprehensive university, and undergraduate students are our bread and butter, like it or not. And in the past, we did not make that connection, and that's why we ended up where we are, and we are trying to rectify it. I apologize for my lengthy answer. I hope it gives you the assurance that we will remain a research-intensive university, and we are going to take teaching seriously, because both are important to us.
Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. I'm going to turn now to question number 10. A lot of questions regarding social science restructuring have been submitted. Thank you for all the people on this slide for your questions that you have submitted on the subject. In reply, the Council of Convocation has written a letter to the head of the School of Social Sciences in July regarding the proposal for change to anthropology and sociology, reflecting the responses of Convocation and the general community. We understood that the views of all interested stakeholders would be given serious consideration. I would like to ask the Vice-Chancellor to give his comments on this matter and request the next slide.
Well, this is a very sensitive matter. Anytime universities have to undertake structural reform leading to cancellation of courses, programs, these are serious matters. And we don't do it lightly. If we had other ways of dealing with our resource issues, we would not have done it. But there are no other ways, because bulk of our expenditure is tied to salary of staff. So you cannot take $70 million out by leaving the same number of people. So that leads to this sort of situation. So let me describe the process. We deliberately decided not to use one-size-fits-all approach because it is damaging to the overall institution. We considered all options. One option was to apply cuts across the board, which was not to. At my level, we made an executive decision that we're going to reduce cost on the support services side twice at the rate on the academic side, recognizing the raison d'etre of why universities exist. So we are protecting the academic core just by virtue of that decision. So if you will, the ratio of cost split between support services and academic schools is 2-to-1. So that's decision number one. That is controversial in itself, but I'm happy to defend it. When it came to implementing it, we decided to take a decentralized approach, recognizing that decisions are best made at unit level as opposed to a central process. That's just a logical thing to do. but we were also guided by our recent past. When we tried to take cost out last time, we took a central approach, and the feedback was that did not work. So we asked the unit leaders, professional service directors, and school heads to come up with their plans. The School of Social Sciences had to come up with its plan. The challenges that school was facing was a long-running challenge. Resources and the number of students did not match. So a proposal was put together, vetted by Change Management Board and others, and I approved the proposal to be put out for consultation. At any rate, when you say consultation, we take consultation seriously. In this particular instance, we are bound by our enterprise agreement to give serious and genuine consideration to any suggestion that will be put forward. So we received many suggestions. Right? Some are very useful. Some are just expressing disappointment, anger, and whatnot. All are valid. So we took all of those, took our time, and then we are ready to come up with a significantly modified proposal. In the meantime, our process allows for other types of intervention. An intervention was made with Fair Works Commission that immediately sets certain things in motion. And before that process is concluded, we can't change work conditions. That's just the law of the land, and it makes sense. If there is a dispute, it needed to be settled. In light of that, we decided to publish our, if you will, proposed changes. So perhaps I'm splitting here. So these are preliminary decisions, not final decision. And the reason we did that, we didn't want to leave the community in the dark. We wanted the community to know where we are heading. And it is my view, reasonable people can disagree, that the changes that have been made to the proposal are substantive. Biggest criticism, and a valid one, was the elimination of a major. So we have found a way of keeping components of a major. Our revised proposal calls for a 12-month period for us to develop a major. A major that will be focusing on, based on the feedback that we have received, on the needs of this state, Aboriginal issues, and the industry. Right? So that's a significant change. The number of changes I have outlined. So those changes will not be implemented before the Fair Work Commission completes its work. But I don't want to leave any illusion that we believe that we have followed the enterprise agreement to the letter. We do not anticipate any significant deviation from where we are. We don't anticipate Fair Works Commission to find flaws in our processes. So when we overcome that hurdle, get a decision from Fair Works Commission, we intend to implement the preliminary proposal that we have laid out. So, is it an ideal outcome? When you're dealing with $70 million deficit, no outcome is ideal outcome. I wish that we didn't have to do it, but I also have absolutely no doubt that this is what is required to put this university on a path to a better future. I acknowledge that it is not optimal in many instances, is terrible for individuals and for units, but I have absolutely no doubt that that is the right thing for the university. So let me just repeat, in spite of what I said, I do not wish to risk prejudicing the outcomes of the processes that are underway at Fair Works Commission, and that also means that I'm unable to undertake any further consultation on the proposal for change or the provisional decision because the mandated consultation period has closed. And some of the questions that you have put in, if I were to deal with them one by one, will border into extending that consultation period. So, although the question was raised about social science, there is at least one question related to molecular sciences. So it is absolutely not true that one particular discipline was singled out. And there will be other considerations coming through. We have 21 schools. All of them needed to meet their budget targets. Some of them were in better situation because of their unique circumstances. It's not that they haven't taken action. They just managed to deal with the challenge without having to take the so-called change process as mandated by our enterprise agreement. My office, we wanted to lose one staff. The moment we realized that it will require change processes, we decided not to proceed. So the change process is a prescribed process by our enterprise agreement. Do I like it? I don't. Do we need a process? We do. So it is a process that was agreed to between the university and the employee representatives, and we signed a deal. So we have to honor that process, and we are following that process. And I appreciate that many of our colleagues and community members will not understand the process. If I were not playing the role that I play, I would have no interest in the process. You know, I'm not a process person, but representing the university, I must abide by the agreement that we have made, and that's what we are doing. It doesn't necessarily bring satisfactory outcome to everybody, but it is what it is. I apologize for my lengthy answer. I hope that it gives you a flavor of what we are trying to do, and it also gives you a sense of where we are and finally the limitations that we have.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice-Chancellor. This concludes the questions on notice. So I thank you very much again, Professor Chakma and Ms. Emma Meska, for discussion of the questions. In conclusion, I want to thank all the people who have assisted me in the preparation of this event. A special thank you to Ms. Juanita Perez, Convocation Officer, and her administrative assistant, Mr. Chris Baffa, and to Harriet Calverley and Amelia Hamilton, who have all played a major role coordinating the arrangements for this ordinary meeting. Perth Audio Visual have recorded this meeting, which will soon be available on the Convocation website. Finally, I wish to thank the Chancellor, the Honourable Robert S. French, AC, the Vice-Chancellor, again, Professor Amit Chakma, the immediate past Warden of Convocation, Dr. Doug McGee, Adjunct Professor Warren Kerr, AM, and Deputy Warden, Adjunct Professor Dr. Brett Davies, for their encouragement since I have taken office. To the members of Convocation Council, and Convocation, I pledge to continue to do my best to advance the reputation of the university and in so doing serve the community. I now declare the Spring Ordinary Meeting of Convocation for 2021 closed at 8:01. Thank you.